5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What does the news tell us about who we are as a culture, as a civilization? How should Christians approach the news? And what does it matter for us to be informed about the news? That's what we're going to be talking about today on Ignition. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald, and we want to set your faith ablaze so that you might live the adventure that comes from a relationship with Jesus Christ. Before we get into the news, we want you to know that we love listener feedback. So if you got questions about today's episode, or if you have ideas for future episodes, please contact us, and the easiest way to do so is by email. The address is ignition@sfcatholic.org. Again, ignition@sfcatholic.org. Renae, how do you spell ignition?
IGNITION.
Well done. I'm joined by my very quick-footed
Just want to make sure I'm spelling it right.
Renae Kranz.
You're supposed to say quick-witted.
Quick-witted.
Or something. I think that would be better.
I knew that was wrong.
Quick-thinking.
Quick thinking. What did I say?
I mean, I'm definitely not quick-footed. That is not accurate. My husband will argue with you on that.
I don't know, witted. Quick thinking, yes. So first of all, did you notice how because I remembered, like I forgot at first. It was, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald.
Speedy, then slow. We slowed down.
So the news.
News.
You are my regular co-host, but you are particularly well suited to talk about this topic. Why are you well suited to talk about this topic?
Well, because I am a journalist by trade, training, whatever.
And training, both. Yeah. So your undergrad,
yeah,
was in journalism.
Yes,
many years ago.
Lots of years ago.
And you've been involved in a variety of journalistic enterprises.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a while since I've written for a newspaper. It's been more than 20 years.
Oh, but
since I've written for a newspaper,
which is, yeah. So, so you have some background, and this is, so I don't have that sort of training, but I am the editor for a monthly magazine.
Well, you're the theological advisor. I don't know if I'd go with editor, as that is my title, but thanks very much.
Well, I'm not the managing editor.
That would be Casey.
What is Casey?
Managing editor.
Seriously?
Yes. Casey Bassett, in case any of you didn't
CBASSETT at okay. It's on the website, for goodness sake.
It is.
Okay. Why? We only got so much time.
Yes.
This is not a complete podcast where, like Joe Rogan, we could talk for 4 hours about this. We only have half an hour because of the radio. So you have some background in this. I have some passion around this. I think it's so. As Christians, we're called to be in the world, although we are not, if you will, of the world.
Right.
So we're to be not of the world means that the way we think, the way we view reality should be as it is, which is the lens of our Catholic Christian faith, which is actually just, again, seeing reality as it actually is. But if you will, through the lens of our Catholic Christian faith. So that's one way what it means to not be of the world, to be not of the world. But we are in the world nonetheless, and especially for us as lay people. So even for those who are ordained or religious, all of us, except for those who are cloistered, live in the secular world.
Right.
That we're the air we breathe, if you will, is the secular world around us, for better or for ill.
Yep.
That's the reality. And so we're called to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to bear in our daily lives. And for lay people in a particular way, what distinguishes us from the religious and the ordained, according to the teachings of the church, is the fact that we are called to leaven the world, so like yeast in the dough, from within, in a way that religious and ordained cannot and do not. So we're in the world. But we're called to be not of the world. So to be in the world means that we should know at some level what the heck's going on. So
yes.
The first premise before we get into we're going to be talking about how do you quote unquote read the news, and whether that's when you're watching the news or listening to the news, but how do we critically engage with the news that we're receiving, whether it's reading, watching, or listening.
Inundated by.
But before we get into that, I think just the importance that we should pay some attention to the news.
Yeah.
Precisely because of what I just said. We're in the world, even if we're not, or if we're called to be not of the world. So I think we're all called to be informed. Now, just for me, in some ways, this is an easy thing. Frankly, I have to guard against the extreme of too much, because in my case, going back literally to elementary school, so this is like the early 80s, I've been interested in national politics.
You're weird.
I am amazing. Are you kidding?
I mean, I am very much a political junkie, but I would not say since elementary school.
I was into national politics literally in elementary school.
Were you like the kid who was always running for class president and all that stuff?
I did. That may have happened in my past. Yes, that might
12
be the
times.
case. No. Anyway, yes, that. Some of that is true.
Okay, maybe 6.
So I've always been, but not local. That's the thing. I was much more interested in national politics than local politics.
It gets all the attention.
So it does.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me. I've had to guard against, as I was just saying, paying too much attention to politics. And in my case, the thing I have to cultivate is being more attentive to local politics, because frankly, I mean, they're both important, but there's a real argument to be made for the fact that local politics, so what's going on in my community, in my city, in my town, is actually just as, if not more important than what's going on nationally. Yeah, the federal income tax rate is set by Congress.
Right.
That's determined in D.C. But there's all sorts of other things that are determined by my mayor or my city council
That affect your life directly.
Exactly.
Much of the time.
One area that I am woefully inattentive is, for instance, school board elections.
Oh, yeah.
In my community,
Yeah.
I think that's a really in our day and age, that's an arena that all citizens, but of course in a particular way, Christians, we should be really attentive to what's going on in terms of in our public schools.
Yeah. Especially if you have kids in school, but not only.
But not only. So
I don't
you
have
and your
kids in
husband,
school,
you don't have
so-
any kids,
Right.
but as a faithful citizen, as the church calls us to be, even if you have no kids, we're called to be attentive to what's going on.
Yeah, because those kids will probably be mayors and city councilors and stuff in the future, and I'd like to make sure they're
Well, if
getting
nothing
taught
else,
well.
they'll be potential voters.
Right.
If nothing else.
True.
Yeah,
They should be.
Right. So we're called to again, I think national, but even more so local politics, be informed. Now, again, if you can guard against there's two extremes to avoid. The one extreme is the one that I've tended toward, which is just being consumed by, like just following it obsessively. For most of us, we don't need to follow. So I do want to talk about habits of consuming
Okay.
the news in a critical way, constructive, critical way. You could be consumed by it where you're following it all the time. You know, you're a Twitter junkie. I think they're
You watch Fox News or CNN all day long.
all day long. You're constantly checking the web, the news. The other extreme, though, I think the other extreme. So that I fall towards that, but I have friends and family members who would say they're on the opposite extreme. They don't pay any attention.
Right.
And again, I think we're called as Christians to that's the extreme to be avoided, because we're supposed to be bringing the gospel to bear, and part of what that means is being aware of what's going on in the world around us.
Right.
So what I wanted to do is two things in particular. We'll just see, time permitting, if we have time to do both, and maybe some others. I want to start by talking about habits of consumption, like in terms of regularity and how we do it. But then I want to talk about how, this is the thing I mentioned earlier, about literally like what are some maybe tools, tips that we can use as we're approaching. So I've got a couple newspapers, actually literally on dead tree, as some people used to say, but also on the web, some sites. And I want to talk about how you, quote unquote, read the news. And I'll explain the quote unquote when we get there. But I want to start with habits of consumption. So, Renae, how would you say, you can talk about what you do or what you would say you should do? I'll leave it up to you. How do you think you should consume in terms of regularity? I'm not talking about what news sources,
Sure.
but in terms of regularity and media, listen, watch, read. What for you, what's the way that you do this?
Well, I, like you, I don't pay enough attention to local news. I actually stopped watching the local news on TV several years ago. I just wasn't finding it compelling or useful. So I do listen to hear some on the radio occasionally, but most of what I pay attention to is more national. But I don't really watch any of the cable news networks on any kind of regular basis whatsoever. I have a few sources that I go to. I do see some news come across Facebook.
Okay.
But it is from reliable sources. I'm not like just my neighbor posted on there that this happened.
Right.
It's reliable news sources that are posting things on Facebook. I also, because of what I do for work, I pay a lot of attention to Catholic news specifically. Okay. And I read several publications from dioceses around us. So do a lot of that. Yeah.
Gotcha. For me, because I could too easily be consumed by what's going on. The thing that I try to do is once, maybe twice a day. Actually in the recent past, I experimented with weekly. I just tried to get myself caught up on the week's events, particularly national. And if you will, politics, but politics in a broad sense. I don't mean what Senator so-and-so was doing, whatever. I mean like the issues of the day. I have weekly, but this is probably confession time. It's too hard for me to stay away.
So you do more than weekly most of the time?
I do more than weekly most of the time. So it's usually a few times a day.
Why is this a problem? Like, does it bring you down? Does it, like, if you do too much, why are you trying to limit it? Just because it sucks up too much of your time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It could. I know that it could.
Okay.
Well, no, I think it's
kind of turn the tables on you there. I'm asking you the questions.
No, I'm glad. I don't know that for me because I'm not like literally engaged in politics. Like I'm not involved directly in local or national politics. I don't know that I need to know on more than a weekly basis what's going on. Right. So therefore, here is the train of my train of logic with thinking like, let's go for weekly, even though I'm bad at it. If I don't need to know, then should I even there's other things that I can do. So even if it's just, say we're just once a day, okay, but that once a day that I'm spending getting caught up on the news, I could be doing something else during that time. So would it be a more fruitful, productive use of my time to limit myself to weekly news consumption once a week, and then so I can do something else in the time that I would have spent during the course of the week otherwise? But
you have FOMO about the news then.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I knew
Casey was going to like that one.
I suffer deeply from the vice of vain curiosity.
Okay.
Do you know what the vice of vain curiosity is?
No, I think
Casey, do you know what the vice of vain curiosity? Casey, how much philosophy did you study in college? Vain curiosity. So, vain curiosity is the desire to know everything and anything.
Okay.
So we have an appetite for knowledge, but just like the appetite for food, we have to moderate.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So there's so just as I can be intemperate in food and the consumption of food and drink alcohol, it can be, and I am, intemperate in the consumption of knowledge.
Judging by the number of books in your office,
no,
yes,
I would argue. So. No.
You just said knowledge.
You didn't say news. That does not evidence my intemperance in that regard.
Okay. Okay.
That does not evidence.
Okay.
What does evidence my
say.
intemperance is the many blogs and websites that I try to follow on a regular basis.
You can really get caught up in that stuff, and that can suck up a lot of your time.
The number of
my
Substacks
goodness.
that I subscribe to bears witness to my intemperance around knowledge.
Do you read a lot of them?
Not anymore. Now I just delete or archive them because maybe I'll read them someday.
And then you never do.
And then I never do.
Right.
But that's the way. That's the way. Anyway.
That's a good tangent.
So I would make the argument that for most of us, so I'm for myself, but I propose, I think for most of us, a weekly news consumption probably would suffice.
Yeah.
Because listen, if it's really important, we're going to find out about it.
Yes.
If something major that actually requires, let's say I decide to consume my news on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
If something major happens on Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to find out about it.
The argument I would make against that, though, is that if you're only looking at the major things, you're actually missing quite a bit of stuff that can inform why these major things might be happening or whatever else it is. You're probably missing a lot of things.
So we'll get to that here in a little bit when we get into the so habits. So for me, most of mine is online. I don't watch the news. I don't really listen to the news. So I go to the sources that I value, that I trust, I should say, and that's where I get the news. I do want to. There is one specific website that I want to mention: allsides.com. Have you ever heard of All Sides? All Sides Media. What they do, and they work really hard by using crowdsourcing for this. But they don't write. They're a news aggregator.
Collection. Okay.
Yes,
Yep.
and there's more. There's a few of these out there, but I think All Sides does really good. Allsides.com of sort of taking issues of the day, and here's what Fox and CNN and MSNBC and whatever else. Right. The different sources, and then they rate again using crowdsourcing. They'll rate the bias of all those sources. I think they do an excellent job, to be honest.
Interesting.
So that's a place that I'll go to because I do think it's important to check out to sources that you don't regularly like. So I've got the ones that I trust, but I think it's important to avoid the echo chamber to check out other sources.
Absolutely.
So I do think it's important.
Yep.
Okay. All right. But what I want to do, so online sources that I trust, but also trying to check other ones. But what I want to focus on here is actually, quote unquote, how we read the news. So we'll do that in just a minute. But if you're just tuning in, welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Bergwald, talking today with Renae Kranz about why Christians should be attentive to the news, but then how we might, quote unquote, read the news. So I have two newspapers, two daily newspapers.
Okay.
The Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
So from the other day as we're recording, so a couple weeks ago as people listen to this, Tuesday, June 7th is the date of the journal. And then I have the Wednesday, June 8th edition of so we're in Sioux Falls, the local newspaper, the Argus Leader. So the Argus Leader is part of the USA Today network now, Gannett News.
Or Gannett,
Gannett,
whichever.
is that how it's said?
Yeah.
Really? How do you know? Have you talked to Mr. Gannett?
We talked about that in college.
Really?
That's a very old,
Oh, so it's Gannett.
No.
Oh. So these are dailies. Now, again, I said that I'm trying to, well, I used to try to limit myself to, I don't subscribe to a newspaper, but I think a newspaper is a good way to talk about. So let's start just with the Argus Leader. Well, actually, it doesn't matter. Here's my proposal. Here's what I think we should do as just, this is not about Christian. This is just, I think, to critically consume the news. It's instructive to be attentive to what are the stories that the editors of the Wall Street Journal or the Argus Leader or any website that you go to, what stories are they choosing, literally in this case, in print to publish?
Yes.
Because that tells us something about either what they think is most important or what they think we want to know about.
Because those don't just appear on the front page; they actually select.
So my amateur outsider perspective is I think so. Editors, there's a journalistic duty to inform the public about certain things, but there's also then the reality. I think it's got an intention a little bit with the fact that they have to sell their media in this case, or their medium in this case, paper. in order to stay in business. So I think there's a balance between what they think the public needs to know about and what they think the public wants to know about. So I think when you look, it's interesting to me to take, in this case, a newspaper or a news magazine, literally in print is easiest, what they think when you look at the stories, like just say the front page, especially above the fold, what they choose to put on the front page, what they choose to put above the fold tells you something about what they think is important and or what they think you want as readers to know about.
Or what they, what they think will sell papers.
Yes, what they think will sell papers. There's a wry little smile. We're not. This is not about bashing media
No.
but what's the wry smile?
Well, a well-known, probably almost everyone's heard it. If it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
That's a very common. It's been around for years in the newspaper business, and not all of them approach it that way, but many do.
Right. So
if it bleeds, it leads.
Sensationalism,
or
sensationalist journalism.
shocking.
Yeah.
Yes, anything like that.
So I think it's important for us, I do think as Christians, again, if we're going to be in the world but not of the world, to sort of take a step back, if you will, and pay attention to so this Argus Leader story, the above the fold, the primary, well, up the top, we get Mitchell girls start fasting class A. That's a golf story. But I think reading this, I would say this is probably the story they want me to see first. So delegation against any proposed gun reform. So this is about our U.S. senators and representatives. And then we also, the next story above the fold, the bottom story above the fold, South Dakota voters head to the polls. So this was from
And notice that
yesterday's.
the headline is directly above the fold.
Okay.
They make sure to make that picture the size so that the headline will fit above the fold, not below it.
So when I see this, when I pick it up and unfold it, what I'm going to see is a little bit about some high school sports and then something about gun reform and where our congressmen fall on that, and then the fact that the voters head to the polls. I turn it over, and flowing from that last story, what South Dakota voters head to the polls, I see what South Dakotans are saying so far, and then I see class of 2021 saw higher graduation rate for students in special education, and city, Sioux Falls, to hold lotteries for new liquor licenses. So, a national news story. Our congressional delegation is against any proposed gun reform.
National, but also state, because there are state delegates. So, yes.
Then a state story about our voting in the primary, state primaries. Class of 2021 higher graduation rate. That's also state, but it's particularly, I think, local to Sioux Falls. And then certainly a local story.
Right.
City to hold lotteries for new liquor licenses.
Right.
So the editors of the Argus Leader, these are the 5 stories that they put before. So I just think it's worth thinking about. And I don't have an answer to this question right now, but what are they saying? Why these 5 stories of all the things when we don't have time? But if you opened this edition, there'd be all sorts of other things that we could find in this issue of the Argus Leader. But these are the 5 that they chose to promote.
Right.
Similarly, I think, so again, this Wall Street Journal issue, D-Day vets return to Normandy beaches 78 years later. So that's the top headline, but probably the next big story. Musk threatens to end bid for Twitter. Big print next to the headline above the fold. UK's Johnson, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, survives revolt but moves forward wounded. And then you flip over and we get high-flying tiger global humbled by unraveling tech bet. Cocktails at virtual bars are extra dry. Oh, that sounds interesting. And SEC eyes big structure changes to market structure. So this is the Wall Street Journal. So you know that there's, and especially you've got business and finance sidebar, you know there's going to be something on the front page, and there's a couple stories that are going to be about business, finance.
Right.
But the big ones, D-Day, Elon Musk's bid for Twitter, and then UK politics.
I thought that Boris Johnson headline was especially interesting.
So why out of curiosity?
The words chosen are really, these are the things you have to pay attention to when you're reading the newspaper. The words that are chosen in headlines, and is that trying to push you to a certain narrative or a certain thought process.
So I'm going to answer my question. My question to you is going to be, what words do you particularly see? But so to me, first I was thinking wounded, then I was thinking revolt, and then also survives.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they convey certain things.
A certain feeling, for sure.
So the way that I'm proposing, what I think we should do, again, just as to consume the news critically, is be attentive to these stories. Mm-hmm. And just this is what the Wall Street Journal editors, in this case, want us to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Of all the stories, and the Journal is chock full of original reporting.
Yes, tons.
And these are the ones that they put on the front page, and in these 3 cases above the fold. Mm-hmm. They're saying this is what we think you either should know about or will want to know about.
Right.
To be honest, Renae, I would say the Musk story is them telling what it's there because they think we want to know about it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Not because we actually do want to know.
Does it matter?
No. Well, yes.
We could quibble about that, actually.
Yes, because what they think we want is, I want to say the B word, is their bias coming through.
Right, yes.
Because it's what they think we want. It might not be what we want at all.
Yeah. Totally agreed. So, but it does. So again, either the combination of what they think is important or what they think we want to know about.
Right.
Similarly, I think with the leader, again, the Argus leader, what we want to know about or what they think we should know about. Mm-hmm. I don't know. In the case of this edition of the Argus leader, I feel like these are probably all what they think we should know about. I don't know that any of them is really them trying to, I don't mean this in a bad way, but pander to.
Yes, and there's also in some of those headlines there's some definite bias in those as well.
Sure.
It's not just national newspapers, it's definitely in
locally as well. Yep. Yeah. So before
we don't have time to really go into it.
So we're running out. We're literally a lot faster than I expected.
Yeah.
The point I think is to just be attentive to the things, to what stories are being presented to our attention and what that tells us.
Yes.
And then to read it critically. To maybe try to read outside of your echo chamber. Try to read other sources, and you might filter them because you know they're biased. But everybody does have a particular perspective or slant, if you will. We all have a bit of a bias, so I think it is good to check out other sources. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Renae?
I could give you a lot, but we don't have time.
We don't have time. Okay, so maybe more to come in a future episode, but just a little tease there. Renae, thanks again for being here.
Sure thing.
And folks, that will wrap up this episode of Ignition. Again, you can email us with any ideas for future episodes or questions about this one. And until next time, may God bless you.